All right, we're back with another episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Doing really well. You know what? I've been thinking a lot about Apple Music lately. Part of this is the annual review process when you have to kind of revisit all the system apps and think about what the changes are and what's going on. And for me, this is almost like a situation with Apple Music where it's not so much the changes, it's the absence of changes that has really gotten me down about Apple Music. So I thought, you and I have talked about music apps a lot. We've talked about a lot of third-party apps. We've talked about some of our gripes about the Apple Music apps now and then. But I thought we ought to just, all in one place, talk about Apple Music, all the different versions of Apple Music on all the platforms, what's wrong with them, and how maybe Apple could fix them. And I guess the place to start is with, where do we start? Because I think there are a lot of issues is one thing. And the other is, what's going on? Why is there virtually no changes to Apple Music this year?
Mm-hmm. So I think you've been, I think we got to contextualize this episode. You came up with the idea for this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because you've been listening to a lot of music lately, much more than I have. My problem is that I was writing the iOS review, and when I'm writing, I find it really challenging to listen to English music, basically.
Yeah, because you focus on the lyrics.
Because my brain always it locks onto the lyrics of a song. And so when I'm writing, it's either going to be Italian music or ambient music for me, like instrumental music, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Video game soundtracks are amazing for that kind of stuff. But I haven't been listening a ton because I've been hyper focused on getting this review done, given the time constraints that I've had this summer. And I think at the same time, you have spent more time than I have rebuilding your setup and, using the Mac Studio and the Studio Display. You've been exposed to all of that. Whereas my setup after, since we bought a house and we moved, my setup is still temporary. We still have temporary furniture and we're waiting for all the new things to arrive. That's one of the many side effects of the pandemic, turns out.
Right.
You gotta wait a couple of months for any piece of furniture you want. So that's fun. But yeah, I still have my old setup. So everything is still temporary for me. Whereas you have now settled into your new workspace. So I think that explains, and I think you've noticed a ton of Studio Display related issues. So maybe we should start from that. Like, how have you listened to music that caused you to notice all these problems?
All right. Well, first, to kind of lay the groundwork, I listen to music, I guess, 3 different ways primarily. One is sitting at my desk, currently through the Studio Display. Another is airplane to HomePods in my living room, typically. And the third is usually wearing AirPods Pro or sometimes the AirPods Max as either I'm walking around, just doing things in the apartment or out and about doing things. I guess CarPlay I would throw in there as a fourth context when I'm driving around. Now, the biggest issues I have, I think, are really with music on the Mac. And before I moved, my setup was a little different. I didn't have the Studio Display yet, and I had a HomePod. I actually used a HomePod Mini in my office that I would AirPlay to. And one of the problems, I think, with music on the Mac is that it's not super consistent when it comes to AirPlay. There have been problems with lag. There have been problems with the music stopping. There have been problems with getting it started in the first place. And my new setup solves that, and then I've got the Studio Display connected directly to my Mac Studio. So I don't have the problem I had using the Mac as an AirPlay device to a Mini. Instead, I've got it connected directly to the display. Now, the display is good. It's actually, I like it a lot. The sound is very good. I'm not in a very big space, so I really don't need more full sound than what can be produced by the Studio Display. And in fact, for the whole morning while I'm working, my son's usually asleep in bed still, so I can't play it very loud anyway. So that has worked out really well. The trouble is, though, that there's been these bugs with the Studio Display, and they hadn't bitten me until earlier this week, where the music would just stop after about 3 or 4 seconds as I was playing, it would still show that the song was advancing, the counter was going up, but I couldn't hear anything. And then I went to a YouTube video, same thing. It was just sound coming out of the studio display. This is not really an Apple, not a music problem. This is a studio display problem. And the difficulty with that is that the only way to deal with it is to unplug your studio display and reboot it, basically by plugging it back in. And that's not great because there's no power button on this thing. There's no connector for the power cable, on your desk behind the display. I have it connected under my desk in a power outlet in the wall, and I had to go, crawl under the desk and unplug it, which is kind of a pain. But yeah, I think one of the things that I find with music on the Mac that is fundamentally broken is the under the hood stuff. It just feels creaky to me. I feel like what happened when we got the redesign of music where it replaced iTunes is that we got was a new skin for iTunes more than anything else. And I kind of get why Apple did that. I mean, iTunes has got to be one of the older, continuous apps that's been going on at Apple for a while now. And there are a lot of features that a lot of people relied on and were very cranky when the early versions of music came out and they weren't included. And they added it all back in. And so there's just all this stuff in there. And the fact that there's both owned music and streamed music all combined into one place, it's a lot. And I think that it's really suffered from that because I don't think it does a great job with things like AirPlay the way, at least to the degree that an iPhone or an iPad does. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Trade Coffee. I've been using Trade for a while now, and I really love the coffees that I've tried. All you have to do to get started is to fill out a simple questionnaire about the kinds of coffee that you like, and then they pick some ones that they think you'll enjoy and send them to you. And what I like about it is it's a little bit like Christmas every couple of weeks when these bags of coffee come because I get a wide variety. It's been a tour of all kinds of different kinds of coffee, and I've loved every single one of them. But it's really neat to try new things. Because these coffees are coming from all over the country, from all sorts of different coffee roasters, and they've been really, really tasty. The thing about Trade Coffee is that when you become a customer, you'll get the freshest and best tasting coffee you've ever made at home. And the coffee you'll be drinking will be from the country's best independent craft roasters. That helps those small businesses out too. And this is really cool. Trade's coffee team actually taste tests thousands of coffee to keep 450 different kinds alive and ready to ship to you every single day. Everyone has that one coffee that they just love, and Trade will help you find it. Trade is confident that they'll match you with the right coffee the first time. And if they don't, just give them your feedback, and an actual coffee expert will work with you to send a brand new bag for free, so you know that you'll be looked after. Whether your friends call you a coffee snob or you just know it, when coffee tastes really perfect, Trade's real coffee experts personally taste over 450 roasts so that they know exactly what to recommend to you. And they've delivered over 5 million bags of fresh coffee with more than 750,000 positive reviews. Right now, Trade is offering new subscribers a total of $30 off your first order, plus free shipping when you go to drinktrade.com/appstories. That's more than 40 cups of coffee for free. Get started by taking their quiz at drinktrade.com/appstories and let Trade find you a coffee you'll love. That URL one more time is drinktrade.com/appstories for $30 off. Our thanks to Trade for their support of the show.
Something that I've noticed, and you remember when I tried Spotify for like 6 months last year, a couple of years ago. It was during the pandemic, and I'm glad I did because it gave me, although there's many things I do not like about Spotify as a company, it at least gave me an appreciation for Spotify as an app on iPhone for a couple of things. One of them is speed and search. Everything in Spotify is very fast and very speedy and very responsive, which is not something you can say about music, unfortunately.
True.
Music on iPhone has always been very clunky, very slow. Spotify, even though everything is a web app for these companies, right? Everything is a wrapper around the web app when it comes to these huge products and services like Spotify or Apple Music. Spotify sort of gives you the illusion of being a native app thanks to that performance. And when you type, for example, in the search field of Spotify, those results, those suggestions, they come up almost instantly. And that was never the case with Apple Music. Whether it's about search or about opening the page of an album or clicking on the tab for listen now or browse, it always takes a couple of seconds. And those seconds add up over time. Now, what I've noticed is that it's getting better in iOS 16 in search, at least. It's a bit, I hate to say something like it feels snappier.
Snappier, yeah.
But I think they have done something in that department to make search a bit faster than before. So while it's not as fast as Spotify, it at the very least when you're typing, you see those suggestions come up as you type, and when you accept one of them or when you just hit search, those results, like you don't see a spinner for a couple of seconds. Now, this is search. It's still not great in other places of Apple Music, in the Music app. So I think a general performance tuning is really something that music needs. But they have maybe only done for search this year.
Right. And search is better on the Mac as well. I will say, though, that, for instance, this morning when I came to use my Mac, I opened up music because I wanted to listen to the new music mix, and it wasn't on and now playing because my Mac was asleep during the nighttime when that updated, and there was no way to refresh the page and see that without first clicking on browse, then going back to listen now. Yeah. So yeah, it's, that's, that kind of thing is not ideal. I think the other thing that I would mention in terms of kind of under the hood things are a couple of things. So the first is that the studio display does sound really nice, and it's a shame that it's not a destination for AirPlay. Now, you can AirPlay to a Mac now, which is great if you have a Mac that happens to be turned on and connected to a studio display. However, a lot of people use laptops that they may disconnect from their studio display when they take them away from their desk, or they may turn off their Mac at certain periods of the day. And while I understand that the studio display would need to have new radios added to it, a Wi-Fi antenna and Bluetooth and that sort of thing, this is a $2,000 plus screen that I have to imagine that you could add those things without cutting too far into Apple's margins. I would like it. I'd just like that to be a place I could place so that if I could, because that's a difference with the HomePod Mini I had in my old office, was that regardless of whether my Mac was attached to the display or not, whatever, it didn't matter what my Mac was doing. I had the HomePod available to AirPlay to with my phone if I wanted to. The other thing is I know a pet peeve of Jason Snell. He's the first one I heard mention it, which is the fact that if you're listening to music with your AirPods on your Mac, you have a laptop and you close it, the music just stops, unlike the iPad, because it's just not designed that way. And now we've got Apple Silicon, which is, basically the same chips that are running those iPads, yet the music stops when you close the lid of your MacBook Pro or your MacBook Air.
Yeah, I heard that from Jason as well, and it's so sad that the music stops when you close the lid. That's just very sad.
It's surprisingly easy to expect it to keep going because Jason uses an iPad a lot, and I have noticed that when I used to sit outside a lot more and work on my iPad. But when I would then bring my MacBook Air out, I'd do what I would be done being outside. I'd close up the iPad, the music would keep playing as I walked inside. And I always expected it to happen with the Mac, and it never did. And it's just kind of one of those things that's like a little disappointment every time you close your Mac.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can improve your health and well-being in more ways than you can ever imagine. Pillow is a simple app that helps you be more aware of your sleep patterns and make informed decisions to improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep, Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad, you can do that too with the press of a button before you go to sleep. If you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can even record sounds like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and other noises during the night that might be affecting your sleep. If you have an Apple Watch that's a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will also display information about the intensity of the sounds during the sleep session and give you a full rating of the exposure the next morning. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before sleep or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. Naps boost your focus, creativity, and overall well-being. So if you can take a nap, you can use Pillow's Power Nap mode. Pillow can wake you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. Starting with watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't need to register or create an account to use Pillow either. You can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of great features that you can use free every day. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option to start a free 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
All right, let's talk about design, because I think when it comes to design, there's really one major problem of the music app, which is the information density and the use of space. And I will go even further and say that the biggest problem of the music app is the Listen Now page. Because for the library, I mean, sure, the recently added grid of albums takes up a lot of space. In search, I mean, that's fine. You have your suggestions. That's actually pretty well done now. In browse, I can imagine them, Apple wanting to have some kind of storefront-like design where you have your new releases and your playlists and what's now available in spatial audio.
Yeah, featured artists and things like that. Featured art,
but the problem is the Listen Now page, because the Listen Now page is they've been using this design for the past couple of years. It used to be called For You before, and the idea is that it's your personalized homepage, right, with all kinds of content. And I feel like, again, Spotify, because let's face it, they're Apple's main competitor here. They do a much, much better job at showing you more stuff on a single screen without having to swipe all the time to reach the bottom of the page.
Maybe they changed the name because it's no longer For You, Federico. You ever think of that?
Wow, you should be in marketing, John.
They decided this is no longer for you. We're going to tell you what to listen to.
I see.
See, listen now, Federico.
Listen now. It's an imperative now. Listen now. My main problem here is that those top picks suggestions, they take up 70% of the page on the iPhone.
Yeah, they do. They're the biggest vertical, portrait mode rectangles on the whole entire page.
Yes.
And even on the Mac with a big screen, I'm looking at it right now, I can only see 3 rows of things here.
Yeah. And when you scroll the page, they break up these sections with smaller sections. So then you have recently played. And then I have, for example, 2 suggestions. So one is called the 2000s, I guess, based on the kind of music I listen to. Another is more like Unwanted, which is the new album by Pale Waves that I've been listening to this week. And then I have another set of huge cards. These are the made for you mixes. And I don't know, I feel like it takes a lot of time to scroll through these suggestions. Some of these items could easily be smaller links. or smaller buttons, which Spotify does, by the way. Like they have much more variety when it comes to the size of elements on their homepage. And like basically my issue is I look at this and then I compare it to the custom homepage that I designed for myself in Marvis Pro, which is an Apple Music client that is based on native Apple Music sections thanks to the Music Kit API. And I look at Marvis and I'm like, yeah, this is so much nicer and more personalized for me. So I'm guessing in keeping with the app store's tradition of wishing for this kind of change, personalization is maybe what we need from the music app in the Listen Now section.
Yeah, I think that that's my number one wish, because I think the only way to deal with this, well, I guess there are two ways to deal with it. One is, I think you're right that there maybe needs to be more variety in the sizes of the different things that are displayed here. You've got, at least on the Mac, you've got the big cards, the square cards, and then you've also got these gigantic things like there's Coldplay's 20th anniversary that is taking up nearly the entire window. And then you do have a few smaller things like the new favorite artists, which is a feature coming with macOS Ventura and iOS 16. So you have some variety here, but I think that there could be a better information density. But I think the real solution, the bigger solution, is the ability to customize this. So I can hide things that I don't care about, whether it's a made-for-you mix that I don't like to listen to, or if it's a particular section here that I don't, for instance, I've got now a row of recommended friends. I don't really want that. I'm not sure what the favorite artists are all about, because that's a new feature where you can go through and you can star artists as you
Yes.
go to their pages, and it's supposed to, I think, feed the recommendations. Can't say that I've noticed my recommendations changing very much. Maybe it's because what I'm playing was from the artists that I picked anyway, but they really serve, I guess, more as shortcuts to artists. And there's something to be said for that, because I think one of the things, and I think it's a knock on music a little bit, and the Apple Music service in particular, is that it's very playlist centric, playlist and radio centric. And I guess album centric to a degree, but there's less of an emphasis on the artists themselves, and that they do a nice job with some of these artist pages. Some artists have a fair amount of detail here about background about the artists and their albums and their videos and all that. And this, I suppose, is a way to surface that more. But I don't think that much is really being done with it. It's like a series of circles that I can click on, and I'm not sure I really need that when I have search.
Yeah, I agree with all of this, and I really feel like, although I maybe use the recently added section, recently played section more than you do, but it's you remember when I tried Spotify for like 6 months last year, a couple of years ago. It was during the pandemic, and I'm glad I did, because it gave me, although there's many things I do not like about Spotify as a company, it at least gave me an appreciation account. Whether you hit play from the iPhone or Mac, or you listen via an Amazon Echo, for example, or another connected device to your Spotify account, you see a full chronological feed of every single album, song, or playlist you listen to, which I think is a really cool way to go back in time and see, what did I listen to last week? Let me pick up that again. And instead, Apple has this horizontal carousel of recently played items that you cannot customize, you cannot really, and it takes up a lot of space. That's really the main problem here.
Yeah,
is
you
that
don't see much.
You don't see much, and they have a really poor use of space, which is also true on the iPad. Like the iPad, I think, has basically the same issues as the Mac version, which is you have a big screen, but the information density is based on the iPhone design. So you don't really see much more than that, really.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think the reason that customization is so important is because people just listen to music very differently. Some people are very playlist focused. I tend to be that way. Other people maybe dive into an artist's catalog first, or want to listen to a whole album, or maybe they're into singles instead. There's just a lot of ways to listen to music, and customization allows you to accommodate more different kinds of listening. Part of the reason I mentioned that I think playlists have always been kind of a major focus of Apple and music is that this playlist sidebar thing has got to change. I don't know about you, Federico, but I guess I've added a lot of Apple Music playlists over the years, and I've got just like, it's just a vast
Mhm.
wasteland of the Apple ones, the ones I've created, which I've pared down over the years, plus smart playlists, and it's too hard to go through, and I'm always collapsing it. It's just there's too much going on there, and I'm not sure that you really need that to be in the sidebar when you don't have, the albums don't live in the sidebar, but in the sidebar with playlists, the actual names of the playlists all reside there, which I think is just too hard to parse in a sidebar on the iPad or on the Mac for that matter.
Yeah, and I mean that's not to mention that we still do not have smart playlists, right?
No, I
And
know.
for the past couple of years, I've thought, oh, they're surely gonna do that now because they've done smart lists in notes and reminders, and then this year they've gone back and they've added even more filters, even more options for making those smart lists and smart folders. But we still do not have smart playlists in music, and we still don't have smart folders in files or saved searches in files, right? So it really it feels to me like these discrepancies are based on the different teams at Apple and the kinds of things they prioritize. And maybe the music team just doesn't prioritize the app itself, just focused on the content aspect or AirPlay integration with things, but not the app itself. I'm thankful that the Music Kit API exists for developers because there's tons of developers doing a lot more interesting work than Apple when it comes to the playback experience itself and the management of music and browsing music. Look at Marvis, look at Soar, look at those dedicated utilities like Albums and Long
Hmm.
Play, for example. Like there's tons of developers doing really interesting work. What's a shame, I think, is that some key features of music, like for example real-time lyrics, are not available via the Music Kit API. So you're always gonna have that glass half full or half empty, if you wish. Like, sure, you can replicate some of the key music interactions via Music Kit, but something as incredible as real-time lyrics, that's gonna be exclusive to the music app.
Yeah, that it really is a shame. And a music kit, it just goes to show how rich the metadata is with music. The Apple has all that metadata. It's all baked into all these files that are on the Apple Music service. And it's just there ready to use with Music Kit. And it's a shame that it's not used in a better way. I mean, I think, besides smart playlists on the iPhone and the iPad, there are a couple of other things. Like a small one that I find really curious is that after we got this shared with you feature, was it 2 years ago or last year?
Last
That
year.
last year that music, music there's shared with you music on the iPad and the iPhone, but not on the Mac, which is really strange to me because it's really a messages feature as much as anything else. But that's like a small thing. I think really the one of the sorest points here has got to be shortcuts, because these shortcut actions that are in the Shortcuts app date back to workflow, and a lot of them are based on things like the iTunes Search API, which is an
Mhm.
API that has barely been touched in I don't know, a decade now. It's
Mhm.
it's used to find apps, it's used to find books, it's used to find movies and TV shows and music, but it really hooks into the iTunes store, not into Apple Music. And as a result, there are huge limitations. First of all, the actions only work with the music that's actually on your device, right?
Yes, yeah, the music that you've added locally to your library.
Right. Yeah, and that's a shame. I mean, I should open up actions that would work with all of Apple Music so that you can search it and play anything, whether it's in your library or not.
I think so. I mean, you take a look at what, for example, developer Alex Hay has been able to do with the real Apple Music online API in Toolbox Pro, with the actions to search the entire Apple Music catalog, and that's just so much better than what you can do with the Shortcuts own music integration. So yeah, I really feel like that entire that entire support, that entire integration between music and shortcuts needs to be redone completely. It needs to be modernized for the Music Kit API and the Apple Music Online API to search content and to start playback of content on your device. And it's such a wasted opportunity, you know?
It really is. With the new predicate filtering and parameters and everything, you could do a lot with music.
You could do a lot with that. And I mean, obviously also like, because shortcuts integrate with Siri, and they already have integration with AirPlay, you could make these custom shortcuts to search the entire Apple Music catalog and start playback and transfer playback on any of your Apple devices where you're signed in with your Apple ID. Like it's such really a wasted opportunity not to consider more deeply and thoughtfully this integration between music and shortcuts. And I keep hoping that it's something that we get next year, but also I've been saying next year for the past 3 years, and I'm kind of tired of saying that.
Right. Well, and the app itself hasn't really changed all that much. Now, Apple can do things to the service and what is delivered on the service, which is nice. And that, new things show up from time to time during the course of the year. But fundamentally, the app hasn't changed a lot. And I have a conspiracy theory for you, Federico, about this.
Okay.
My theory is that music was the next big app slated to move to Swift UI, and after shortcuts, the brakes were put on that.
Interesting. I could see that.
I mean, because, we had that classical music acquisition. What was it, last year? I always forget the name of the service that they You're the one who wrote about it. Primephonic, right. Primephonic. And it, unlike a lot of acquisitions, Primephonic has been mentioned a couple of times in press releases, or that there was some component of classical music coming to music. It's shown up here and there. And I do wonder whether there was a plan to revamp music, especially, and its design from the ground up to incorporate classical music and take the opportunity to move it over to Swift UI. And that this app, especially when you talk about it on the Mac, this is a complex app that I think would be very difficult to do in Swift UI right now.
Yeah, I think you're onto something here, because it's also weird that they haven't done anything for the Primephonic integration that they promised it was going to be a separate app. And I kind of wonder if maybe the plans have changed there. And so they're not going to do a separate, I don't know. But I think you are onto something with this theory that clearly they wanted to do something new. And maybe it was supposed to be in Swift UI, but it's just not working as it's supposed to right now.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by SourceGraph. So you've hired a brilliant developer. That's awesome, but you're going to have to get them onboarded. And doing that when your company is growing is going to be a common occurrence that's a big undertaking every single time. One of the biggest challenges to new hires is to get them up to speed with the projects that their team is working on. This can be tricky if the code bases that your developers are working on are large. Thankfully, SourceGraph makes it easy to move fast, even in those big code bases. Developers know that knowledge is most useful when it's findable. Centralization helps, but most companies store information in at least a couple of different locations. So how do you make knowledge accessible to those who need it? As a code intelligence platform, SourceGraph gives developers what they need to drive their own learning over time and in different conditions and in different situations. Teams without SourceGraph need to rely on asking colleagues and reviewing out-of-date documentation, which is cumbersome and time-consuming. But with SourceGraph, every developer can search across millions of repositories to find specific code, saving time for themselves and everyone else. So when the questions do come up, you know that they're the big stuff that's worthy of the extra time. SourceGraph was created to make developers' lives easier, and today they work with leading companies across every industry, including 3 out of 5 of the top tech companies, plus PayPal, Uber, Plaid, GE, Reddit, and Atlassian. Visit about.sourcegraph.com to learn more. That's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why some of the biggest tech companies in the world use SourceGraph and to see what it can do for yours. Or just click on the link in the show notes to let them know that you heard about them from us. Our thanks to SourceGraph for their support of the show. I mean, I guess another area we should talk about is widgets. I mean, we would obviously like more control over the music widget, do more with it, and the ability for third-party developers to be able to have play controls. I mean, we're talking about giving music a makeover here, but while we're at it, I think, as you said, with with the real-time lyrics and other features, widgets, it'd be nice to have at least some basic interactivity there so that the music players wouldn't have to basically crash back to the home screen in order to play the music and then reopen.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very nice to have better widget integration, but proper. I think the problem here again is unsurprisingly Swift UI,
Yeah.
and why it's really not the entire widget kit system is really not designed right now to handle that kind of task, which is presenting real-time data with audio integration and interactive playback controls. Now, obviously, Apple could make a special Apple Music widget that uses a private API or multiple private APIs to do that. And I really think they should. And I think it's especially funny that they do have that kind of widget for Apple Music on Android, but they do not have that kind of experience on iOS because the framework is too limited to offer that. And widgets are not really interactive like that on iOS. And in the progress, obviously this applies to third-party developers as well. An app like Marvis shouldn't have to resort to that hack of opening the app and quitting you back to the home screen to sort of fake its way around having playback controls on the home screen, which is the way that the Marvis Pro widget works right now. So absolutely, I agree. And I'm also very surprised that there's absolutely no music lock screen widgets in iOS 16. None of Apple's media apps have any lock screen integration whatsoever. And so once again, third-party developers are coming into this space. And just a few days ago on Twitter, I found these developers working on this utility called LockPod. And LockPod, which is currently in a test flight beta, it's a utility that lets you put music on the lock screen, meaning these are links to your favorite albums or playlists. And when you tap one of those lock screen widgets, you can start playback via LockPod, or you can be redirected to that item in the music app. Why is Apple not making these widgets? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I think that's a really neat idea, and I'm really hopeful that app takes off because it's a really cool way to do it. It's just one of those things where it's so convenient. If you pick up your phone, you don't have to unlock it. All you have to do is hit that one button, and you can maybe play a shuffle list of everything you've loved on Apple Music. I have a couple of other things for you, Federico.
Okay.
One is I want to talk about the algorithmic playlists. Aside from those should be part of the customization we already talked about. I should be able to hide the ones I don't like. The fact of the matter remains that they're still too sensitive to outlier music. And what I mean by that is that if you have a week where, let's say you're not a person who's into country music, but you happen to listen to it. You just come across some country song that you really like, and you play it a few times during the course of the week. You're going to get more country music than you want in your new music playlist at the end of the week.
Yeah.
It's just too sensitive to, and that's what I mean by outliers. I mean, I think everybody has it. There's some genre of music that's just not for them, but that doesn't mean that you never listen to a song in that genre. Maybe you do. And I noticed this more it's not just outliers. It's more subtle than that too, because I know that I listened to several pop songs this past week and my new music mix was just way too much pop. I mean, it's just not what I wanted. And I feel like that's a contextual thing that those algorithms really need to be better tuned for, because it needs to recognize trends and not just pick out what happened during the last week. That should be weighted. That should be part of it. It's important what you're listening to currently, but there's also what you listened to last week or last month or even 5 years ago that is important, and that you put together a bunch of metadata about how often it's been played, how often you skip it, how often you stop in the middle, whether it's been loved or not, whether you've rated it or not. There's a million different bits of metadata that can come into play here to craft something that gives you a mix that's not just, and I'm not talking about just necessarily the new music mix, but any of these mixes that's a better combination of what your intent is and what you will like at a particular point in time.
Mm-hmm. I wish for better keyboard shortcuts on the iPad.
Yes.
The keyboard navigation on the iPad is essentially non-existent in Apple Music right now. And I just wish it feels so. Honestly, everything about music feels so anachronistic compared to the rest of iOS and iPadOS. The app doesn't support keyboard shortcuts, doesn't have widgets, doesn't have modern shortcuts integration, doesn't support multi-window.
Yeah.
At the very least, it supports dark mode, I guess. So, yay. Doesn't support lock screen widgets.
They did do context menus, which you know, they're one of the first apps that did that, and I think because they're very necessary in music, because there's just so many things you can do with a particular song.
Yeah, they do. They do support context menus, and so that's nice. But yeah, on the iPad, multi-window, of course. Like, look, it's not like I wanna listen to two songs at the same time. That's silly. I just wanna have one window that's showing me a playlist and another window that's showing me the top charts. Like, I don't think that's a wild idea.
Oh yeah, and you could then drag and drop songs between your list, you know, and your
or
playlist.
I could do
right?
that.
That
I
would
could
be-
do that.
That's a use case. Be able to move.
That would
things.
actually be super nice. Yes.
Yeah, it'd be
That's
great.
it.
I mean, why not? I mean, they're all based on some sort of URL on the back end. All you're doing is moving a URL over. Really,
I want to
think.
have, Stage Manager is here. I want to have multiple albums in different windows. Why not? I should be able to do that. What else do I want? Well, there's something I want you to explain that you mentioned in Weekly. Something that Shazam is now doing, but
Right.
music
right.
is not.
Yeah, so this is a brand new feature in Shazam that just came out last week, which is for certain artists, it's really just featured artists, I guess. I haven't really come across this yet, but if you have Shazammed a particular track, you can go and you can see more information about the artist. It's a little bit like, what was the name of the social features that were in music for a hot second? What? Connect. Yes, about the most generic name you could have. But yes, it's a little bit like that in that there will be photos, information about upcoming concerts, and that sort of thing in Shazam, which, this is a whole nother conversation. It's like Shazam, which just celebrated 20 years about a week and a half ago, is, a success story as an independent app that became a part of the entire OS on iOS and iPadOS, but I feel like it's never been super well integrated. It's really not been that long since even the way it was integrated in Control Center, the lists that you would see in Control Center were different than if you used the app itself. They didn't like automatically sync together until not that long ago. And this feels like a feature that, sure, it's great that it's in Shazam, but why wouldn't that be in the music app instead? And why doesn't the music app just have a Shazam button itself, for instance? I don't know. I don't feel like, I feel like Shazam maybe is too much of an independent app still. I don't have a problem with it being an independent app, but I don't feel like enough of what Shazam does has been moved into music. And this new feature is a good feature, an interesting feature, but it feels like something that would work better in music, where there's access to not just the things that you happen to Shazam because you were in a restaurant and you didn't recognize a song, but instead the music that you already know and love.
Yeah. Yeah, and Shazam is really doing a bunch of fun things, and I've always advocated for that kind of integration for merchandise and concerts and concert tickets.
You have.
And I've been saying that forever. Like, that kind of stuff should be in music. Spotify is doing more and more of that kind of stuff. Whereas it seems to me like we haven't even mentioned this, but it seems to me like Apple's attention is more on the radio part of Apple Music, which is funny because they're spending so much time on the radio component, but still the radio experience is still so bad. Like, despite all the effort and all the content that goes into that, you still cannot have push notifications for when shows go live.
Yeah, or a calendar at things added
Or
to
a
your.
calendar.
I mean, it's a mystery when any of these things happen on radio. It really is still a mystery. I mean, yeah, you can figure it out, but it should be way easier than it is. And I think that one of the things we saw too is that Apple recently opened a studio in Nashville, and I think they've got a couple of other ones planned where they're doing, I guess, in-house mini acoustic concerts, or maybe they're not all acoustic, but
Yes.
and that's the kind of thing too that it's like, well, all right, shouldn't that be part of this? Shouldn't that be like scheduled? Maybe have a live component if it's recorded, it can be done live where you can listen in at the time, and then it would be available just in general on music. And they're doing, they did those shows on the music channel in TV Plus, and those were not super well publicized in terms of when do you tune in to watch those. That whole thing with Apple Music and TV Plus is a little loose and a little, I don't know, not super well thought. I don't think it's just a stream of music videos. It's very much like MTV started as, which is fine, but I feel like there's more that could be done to integrate music and TV Plus as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, so looking ahead at the future, I mean, look, something that I wanted to say, like, typically we don't do these kinds of episodes where we're like, let's complain about something for an hour.
Yes.
But somebody's got to do it every once in a while, when something in such
it's something we love,
shape,
Federico.
But it's also something, exactly, like we do it out of love because we love Apple Music and we use it and we use it a lot and we want it to get better. But I also feel like at the same time, what's a good way to put it? I feel like a lot of the people who work on music may just care about the sort of Hollywood aspect of it, like getting to talk to musicians and celebrities and
Right.
DJs and whatnot, rather than the experience of the app itself.
It's like an HBO Max problem where they have a terrible app but a great service, right? Because
Yes, and I see many parallels here with Apple Music, where they have a great service, terrible app, and I don't know what the issue is. Is it the problem that the music team is not in Cupertino? Is the problem that they don't have enough engineers or designers? I have no idea. But just as a user, looking at it, using it, I see so many issues, and not just issues. Features that are not there, that have been around for a few years on all of Apple's platforms, and they're just not being used. It's the non-usage of features that everybody else, including Apple's other teams, are using, that upsets me. Why are you not doing this thing? Why? Like, don't you just have the time? Like, I don't get it.
Or doing it in kind of a half measure way, because one of the things that I'm reminded of too is the new way you can add your favorite artists. What that results in is you get notifications when those artists release music, and they're time sensitive notifications. It's like, come on, Apple. It's like, yes, I do want to know when the new album comes out, but I really don't need it to be a time sensitive notification. It just isn't. So
but you really need to know,
and add to that, and I'd be fine with being notified about concerts if I want to hear about those things, but also not time sensitive. Let me get to that in my own time when I'm taking a break and want to listen to some music.
Yeah. So somebody's got to do it. Have we fixed music?
Yes.
I don't know.
Know.
Yes, we fixed music, but somebody's got to do it. So hopefully, by this time next year, we'll have. I think your theory. I'm still thinking about that. I think you're onto something. I think it's got to be related to SwiftUI. I think the Apple Music classical component fits into this story.
Something stuck, right? Something stuck is what I think in the background. Yes. I think that's true.
Yeah, so we'll see if it gets unstuck by this time next year at some point.
Yeah, I guess we will. All right, Federico. We promise that we will do a more positive episode next week. But for now, that's all we have. I want to thank our three sponsors again.
I got an idea for you, John. What's an app you like?
Marvis Pro.
Okay, next week we're going to do Let's Ruin Marvis Pro.
Oh, no. No, don't do that. That poor developer. I thought you were going to say, let's say nice things about Marvis Pro. I guess we've already done that quite a bit in the past. Federico, what are you doing to me? All right. I'm going to thank those sponsors, Federico, Pillow, SourceGraph, and Trade, and let everybody know that you can find us over at macstories.net. You can find Federico on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.